So in simple terms, when we're trying to diagnose first trimester pregnancy failure or spontaneous abortion, the basic rules are pretty simple. A pregnancy with abnormal gestational sac or contents, that in other words, a pregnancy whose gestational sac fails to meet one or more of the norms on the prior slides. Such a pregnancy is at elevated risk for pregnancy failure. But it doesn't prove that it's a failed pregnancy. It may prove to be normal. Some of the abnormal findings based on the prior table are definitive for pregnancy failure, and others are worrisome but not definitive for pregnancy failure. And the key to accurate diagnosis of problems in the early first trimester are to know which abnormal findings are definitive for pregnancy failure and which are merely worrisome and need follow-up. So how do we make the diagnosis? Well, the way that I do it is as follows. There are two situations when I'll diagnose a definite failed pregnancy. One is if I see a crown rump length of 5 millimeters or greater and there's no heartbeat, that pregnancy is not going to make it. There's no need for a follow-up ultrasound. A second situation in which I'll diagnose a definite failed pregnancy is if I know the gestational age to be at least 6.5 weeks, and there's no heartbeat. To be certain, I should know it to be at least 6.5 weeks. If I see no heartbeat, then that's a definite failed pregnancy. Now note that I have known to be in italics and in a different color. That's because we have to use definite criteria. How do we know the pregnancy to be at least 6.5 weeks? If a woman is 6.5 weeks based on her last menstrual period, that is not certain information. The LMP is notoriously unreliable. I would know it, for example, if a woman had a prior ultrasound, say an ultrasound a week ago, we saw a yolk sac, so we knew it to be 5.5 weeks then. If it's a week later, I know it to be 6.5 weeks today. Another situation where I know the gestational age is when the woman got pregnant via in vitro fertilization. So in these two situations, I would diagnose a definite failed pregnancy. Really, any of the other abnormal findings based on the table that I showed you a few slides ago are worrisome but not definitive for failed pregnancy. So that, for example, if I see no fetal heartbeat and a crown rump length of 1 to 4 millimeters, I'm very worried but not certain. If I see a mean sac diameter of at least 16 millimeters and no embryo, I consider that worrisome but not definitive. If the beta HCG is 1,000 or greater and there's no gestational sac, again, I'm worried, but it's not definitive for a failed pregnancy. Other worrisome findings include a large subchorionic hematoma or a large yolk sac. And then the last category in the diagnosis of early pregnancy failure is the situation where there is a heartbeat on the scan today, but I see something that makes me worried about subsequent pregnancy failure. So the embryo is alive today, there is a heartbeat. When would I be worried that about subsequent failure? Well, the situation would be that would apply if there's a heartbeat today, but the heartbeat is slow. There's a slow heart rate in early pregnancy, and I'll get into very shortly into what how slow is too slow for a heart rate. If there's a heartbeat and a large subchorionic hematoma, a heartbeat and a large yolk sac, a heartbeat and a low amniotic fluid volume, all of those findings are worrisome for subsequent pregnancy failure. Here are some real-life examples of the various categories and the various ways that we make diagnoses. This is an example of definite pregnancy failure. You can see on the left-hand image the embryo, the crown rump length is measuring just over 5 millimeters on this transvaginal scan, and you can see on the video clip here there's no heartbeat. This is definite pregnancy failure. No need for a follow-up ultrasound to confirm the diagnosis. The diagnosis is confirmed based on this scan alone. Here's another example of a definite pregnancy failure. A woman came in early in pregnancy. She was having some bleeding, pain. We did an ultrasound, and we see a gestational sac with a yolk sac. Based on this ultrasound, we said that she's 5.5 weeks along. We have no way of knowing whether the pregnancy is going to make it or not. In fact, we have no way of knowing whether there's a live embryo growing because it's too early to see the embryo. She comes back a week later for a follow-up scan. At this point, you can see that there is an embryo. It's measuring 3.5 millimeters, but there's no fetal heartbeat. So in this situation, we know that this is a failed pregnancy with certainty, not because the embryo measures 5 millimeters. In fact, it doesn't. It measures 3.5 millimeters, but because we know the gestational age to be at least 6.5 weeks, based on a prior 5.5 week ultrasound a week ago, and there's no heartbeat. These are two different cases. Pair of images on the left, pair of images on the right. In both of these cases, there's an embryo measuring under 5 millimeters, and there's no heartbeat. This one measures just over 3 millimeters, no heartbeat. This one measures about 2.5 millimeters, no heartbeat. Both of these are very worrisome findings. In general, when you see any embryo that you can measure and there's no heartbeat visible, the pregnancy is not going to make it. But occasionally they will, and that's why this is a worrisome but not definitive finding. So in the case on the left, on follow-up ultrasound, there was demise, and no great surprise. Because of this worrisome finding. The image on the case on the right, however, you can see 1 week later on follow-up, there is a heartbeat. It was surprising to us, but it's because we will occasionally see a heartbeat on follow-up. Occasionally, these cases with a measurable embryo with no heartbeat will go on to develop a heartbeat. It's because of these that we diagnose probable pregnancy failure, not definite pregnancy failure, whenever we see a crown rump length of 1 to 4 millimeters and no heartbeat. One of the findings that indicates that the fetus or embryo is alive on today's scan, but is at elevated risk for subsequent pregnancy failure, is a slow heart rate. You can see with your eyes that this heartbeat looks kind of slow. When we do an M mode and we actually measure the heartbeat, we can see it's going at 80 beats per minute, which, as you'll see in a minute, is a slow heartbeat. When we see this, the pregnancy is almost certain to go on to fail because of the slow heartbeat. So we would follow this up in a week or two to determine whether to see how the pregnancy does. Now, how slow is too slow? Well, this slide is a little bit complicated, but what it represents is the findings of a study published several years ago by myself and Dr. Carol Benson. We looked at the relationship of the embryonic heart rate to the first trimester survival rate. If you look at the graph on the left, this is for a gestational age of less than 6 weeks and a day, or a crown rump length of 4 millimeters or below. You can see that when the heart rate is less than 80, there's about a 0% first trimester survival rate. As the heart rate increases from less than 80 to 80 to 89, 90 to 99, and greater than 100, the survival rate goes up and up and up until it hits a plateau above 100. So we would consider 100 or above to be normal, 90 and below to be slow, and anything in between 90 to 99 to be intermediate. When the pregnancy is a little further along, 6.3 to 7 weeks, or crown rump length of 5 to 9 millimeters, the same kind of findings occur. As the heart rate goes up, the survival rate goes up. These numbers, though, are all 20 beats per minute higher, so anything under 100 has almost no chance of making it. Anything under 110 has a low chance of making it. Normal is above 120, and in between is the indeterminate range.